spoke, 7 family members, including your wife, have died of this of autoimmune deficiency syndrome, or the opportunistic disease that invaded their bodies after their immune system was shut down by the virus. Whoa. Without knowing it, you infected your wife. Without even knowing it. Before you had any information. Is that so?
Right. And the guilt and the anger almost killed me.
Sure. You don't have to explain that to anybody. She died when, Loris?
April of '90.
And are you the only surviving brother? You have one brother that was not is not a hemophiliac, is that right?
Correct. There's 11 children in my family. The 3 oldest boys and the 3 youngest boys have severe factor VIII hemophilia. The one in the middle does not. And so that makes us an unusual family to begin with.
Really, it's unusual. If one, it's almost always all of them, no?
No.
What makes you an unusual family?
Because the one in the middle was the skip.
I see. Where is the skip usually?
Either at the beginning or the very end.
I see. This is a crazy statistical random thing in any event, isn't there? And there's no perfect science in absolutely identifying. Hemophilia is as random as the disease itself.
That's right.
So all of your brothers then, as you were growing up, had to endure being careful in the playground and all those other things?
But my folks let us try and be as normal as possible. We had to learn our limitations because Mom couldn't keep track of, 6 hemophiliacs. The only thing she could keep track of is the way down to the hospital and back.
Yeah.
Right. And we survived with plasma. We survived with factor VIII. I remember getting whole blood when I was young.
Whole blood?
Yeah.
Just to help you clot?
That's right. And then initially when they tried to clot us older hemophiliacs, the more blood you pumped in, it overloaded the circulatory system, so we bled out of our nose, out of our gums. But you needed blood to get the internal bleeding to stop.
Yeah. Then came this magic bullet, and isn't that an interesting metaphor?
It was a way for me to cut the umbilical cord for the medical center. I didn't have to go to the emergency room anymore. I didn't have to go to lay in a hospital bed for 3 or 4 days and let plasma and cryo drip in. It made me almost a normal human being.
This is called factor VIII, is it not?
Factor VIII, concentrated.
Concentrated factor VIII.
Mm-hmm.
Hemophiliacs could finally do it themselves at home.
We didn't have to miss much school. We didn't have to miss much work. We could be almost a normal human being.
When did the yellow light go on for you, Loris?
I think probably in 82, 83, when AIDS came up, and then it was called GRID, and then they changed it to AIDS, and then they started to say Hemophiliac at the end, but first it was gays, IV drug users, and Haitians. And when they gave symptoms, the first thing one of the symptoms, the easiest, was swollen lymph glands, and I went into the mirror and felt my lymph glands, and they were swollen. And I figured I had HIV. But early on, they didn't have a test for HIV until 1985. And then all the hemophiliacs were tested. And I found out in November of '85, and they asked Jan to come in, and I asked to wait till after the holidays, and I took her in January of 1986, and she tested positive.
That's exactly what happened to Ryan White. He was tested before Christmas of '85, and they waited till after Christmas to tell him. So the middle of the decade, the curtain began to raise and reveal. It was unbelievable. I mean, it had to be, the havoc was still not quite fully understood. How widespread was this issue? Are you sick now, Loris?
I have not been sick due to HIV. My T cell count is 124.
Which is lower than it should be.
Yeah.
You're looking for 200 plus, right?
I'd be satisfied with that.
Right. What are the symptoms? Are you tired? Is there anything?
I am nothing. My T cell count dropped below 200 in December of '89, right before my wife died, because of all the stress.
Right.
But then I started on AZT, and it popped it back up again, and I'm steadily going down.
I wish in my next life I'm going to have a longer show, but this is a very important point here. Tell us your own view about culpability here, and what you must have some rage here. I mean, 7 members of your family, including your wife, whom you loved, and whom you, without having any information at all about this, infected. Who do you blame? What would you want to share with this audience, Flores?
Early on, I blamed the gay population and the IV drug users. But now I blame the manufacturers of Factor 8 and Factor 9. With the documentation that we have, I seriously think that they knew what was going on. And in less than 5 years, I had 7 family members robbed from me. And no matter what kind of a settlement they would make to me, it wouldn't be enough. I would sooner have my family members back.
You are a member of a class action suit against the manufacturer of the factor that infected you.
That is correct.
About how many?
I took five different manufacturers made the product, and I took all 5 of them.
All of them. How many, just curiously, how many plaintiffs in this class action suit, round numbers?
10,000.
And you see the hemophiliac community as, do I understand you to say, too angry to really be coalesced on this issue?
Some of the hemophiliacs are too afraid of being rejected. They're not willing to come out. They're afraid that if they tell people they're HIV positive, they're no longer going to be included in school. Sure. The insurance company will cancel them. And that's the most important part of our life.
The job.
Yeah.
Who gets promoted when you're HIV? Hey, who's going to talk to you at the Xerox machine? Who isn't going to talk to you? Who's going to be afraid of you? Who's going to be afraid to touch you, shake your hand? Wow.
My wife worked in the medical community as an executive secretary, and when she told the orthodontist that she was HIV positive, he asked her to resign, and he fired her 2 weeks later.
Well, Bob Baldwin and Dana Kuhn coming up. We'll talk about the NHF, which is the National Hemophiliac Foundation, and the lawsuits, and what's going to happen, and why did this take so long? And what about states where you can't sue for blood products? And is that constitutional? I want to go to a state where you can't sue talk show hosts. I mean, just pass the law. Why can't you sue for blood products? And we'll be back in just a moment. Our hemophiliacs. Bob, you're the only member of your family. There's no other family history of hemophilia?
There's no family history, but my brother also had hemophilia.
Uh-huh.
He passed away of AIDS 1 year ago.
Yes. And are you infected?
Yes.
And so is Dana.
Yes.
You worked for NHF.
No, I was a volunteer for a number of years.
I see. And what did you learn? Give us, in your most succinct and brief way. There are lots of questions out here. Tell me what you think we should know, Bob.
Well, it's a horrible tragedy when 10,000 Americans, this happens to 10,000 Americans. But
well, there are only 20,000 hemophiliacs in the United States of America. Is that right?
Correct.
And you're here to say half of them are infected with HIV.
Correct. The NHF, the National Hemophilia Foundation, has had many good programs over the years. My mother was on the executive committee back in the 60s, the national basis. Right. I've volunteered to do organized hemophilia work for about 20 years. However, the NHF was partially responsible for the spread of HIV in this country. No matter how well-intentioned they were partially responsible. And they will not admit this, that they made a mistake. They made many mistakes. And I was involved more and more over the past 3 or 4 years. I got involved to try to find out what went wrong. How did this happen to all of us? And I spent many hundreds of hours the last 3 or 4 years trying to answer that question for myself. And that's...
well, why don't you tell us what you suspect?
Well, there was rampant conflict of interest in the organization. The doctors, this basically goes back to the doctors who were on the advisory committee of the National Hemophilia Foundation, who we trusted, who were paid consultants for the pharmaceutical companies at the same time.
So if you promoted a certain brand of factor, you got a kickback.
Correct.
And so there was in your...
In some cases.
In some cases, and in which you allege, as yet without proof, at least a foot dragging on the matter of a full, robust inquiry because of the restraint placed on the possibility of considerable loss of profits if this thing should prove to be true.
Correct.
You also were able, was it not your efforts that extracted from the Hemophilia Foundation certain documents which appeared to support the case of, don't worry, this isn't serious, in the early go?
Yes, there were a number of us who were not named to a document search team to go over the past files between 80 and 85 to try to clear the name of NHF, because a lot of us felt that in order to move forward, we have to find out what went wrong in the past.
July 14th, 1982. This is Hemophilia News Notes from the National Hemophilia Foundation. I say again, July 14th, 1982. I'm going to read this rapidly. We're running out of time. The CDC issued a report that 3 hemophiliacs had developed rare and unusual infections associated with a condition in which there are disease in the body's ability to combat disease. These 3 cases represent an unusually high rate of this disorder and may have developed as a result of an unknown, potentially immunosuppressive agent. One hypothesis that is being investigated by CDC is that the agent may be a virus transmitted similar to the hepatitis virus by blood or blood products. Paragraph. It is important to note that at this time, I say again, this is dated July 14th, 1982. It is important to note that at this time, the risk of contracting this immunosuppressive agent is minimal, and CDC is not recommending any change in blood product use. A blue ribbon panel of experts is being established, et cetera, skipping, important, bottom of the page, large caps. Remember, CDC is not advising a change in treatment regimen at this time. If there are any questions, contact your physician or Hemophilia Treatment Center. And we'll be back in just a moment. Be positive. And you likewise infected your wife?
Unknowingly.
Totally without knowledge. You were transfused how many times? Were you frequent?
I have mild hemophilia, and prior to 1989, I infused once. I had broken a foot, really didn't need it, and it was March 26, 1983. I was infused, and 5 days later, I was hospitalized with hepatitis, severe hepatitis, and presenting other symptoms, which we know now were AIDS symptoms.
You're left with a 4- and a 6-year-old child.
Right. My wife died in 1987, leaving me with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Uh-huh. What do you want to add to what Bob has said here, Dana?
Well, I believe that I am a named class action rep in this class action lawsuit against the National Hemophilia Foundation and the manufacturers, and I really believe that the National Hemophilia Foundation had a responsibility, and they had knowledge, they knew what was going on, but they failed to communicate this with us extensively. Matter of fact, in these memos, time after time, even after recalls were made of the product, they said in large, bold letters across the front, NHF is urging you to not change your treatment regime. In other words, keep on pumping this stuff into your veins. You'd be flipping a coin, and they're telling us that we need it because if we didn't get it, that we would all die from bleeds.
A letter signed by Louis Alidort, Medical Co-Director of the National Hemophilia Foundation, November 1982. Although, as you know, 5 cases of acquired immune deficiency syndrome have been confirmed among hemophiliacs. In addition, other cases are now under review by the Centers for Disease Control. Although little is known about AIDS and how to spread, one theory is that it may be an infectious agent transmitted by high-risk population groups to hemophiliacs through blood products. It is considered prudent at the present time to urge all sources of Factor VIII products to exclude from plasma donation all individuals who belong to these groups. There's nothing here said about let's get rid of of our inventory. Right. Yeah. We are well aware this is a sensitive issue and do not want to cause undue alarm.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
They patronized us. They made the decision for us.
Right.
You want to add something there, Dad?
Well, they had knowledge and they could have stopped it, you know, but because you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies here that are billion-dollar corporations, even today, it's like David and Goliath. And you know who we are, and you know who they are.
Yeah. You cannot sue for blood products in Indiana. Is that right?
I just know you cannot sue for blood products really across the country because they say that blood products are not a product, they are a service. But yet they'll bill your insurance company as it being a product and not a service.
So that the ban against suing on the matter of blood products is nationwide? It's not individual states?
Yeah.
So what do you suspect? How could this sounds unconstitutional to me, but you don't want to get your advice from a non-lawyer. May we have your feeling on this?
Well, we feel that it's wrong. That I know why it happened. In the mid-'70s, there were a number of transfusion cases of hepatitis after heart surgery, and this caused a national hysteria about hepatitis, and so they created blood shield laws so that you couldn't sue the blood banking industry for transmitting hepatitis.
But Phil, we have documents that state that they knew that they had a problem with that product before Eric ever got his first shot and before thousands of other kids ever got their first shot. They knew. There's document proof.
And they didn't do anything about it because
money and greed.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
They wanted to make sure that we didn't have any life-threatening bleeds. I never had a life-threatening bleed in my life.
Neither did Eric.
We had an alternative clotting product made from 8 donors instead of 20,000.
That would have saved lives had it been used.
That's right.
May I ask you to join me in thanking all these guests for their services provided and promoted.